You know, for years, one of my favorite things to do when the spring rains come is to throw my mud boots on and my rain jacket and grab an umbrella and just go out and go for a walk in God's creation. And there's something I just find extremely peaceful to be out in the midst of a storm, the rain falling, the wind blowing, but to be under the peace of this umbrella. And the reality is for you and me, as we all know, that the question is not if the storms are coming, the question is really when are they coming? And that leads us to the next question of how are we prepared and how are we traversing the storms that are coming? And do we have this umbrella of peace over us? It makes me think of that word peace that's mentioned in John chapter 14 when Jesus is talking with his disciples. In verse 27, he says, "My peace I give you, but I do not give as the world gives," because Jesus is talking about a completely different type of peace that he wants to leave you and me, a peace that doesn't remove the storm, but a peace that gives us shelter in the midst of the storm, that we would ride the storm out well, that we would understand that we have a covering over us, and that we can find peace and rest and wholeness in the midst of the storm, the uncertainty, the trial that we're going through. Now this peace that Jesus is referring to here, it's derived from the Old Testament word that's translated shalom, or wholeness, that Jesus actually wants us to be whole in the midst of the storm. And this was a greeting that was used, and it was this idea of an all-encompassing well-being that only God can provide. Friends, do we have that all-encompassing well-being that only God can provide in the midst of our storms? And then it also makes me think of times where I've been in my car and I'm driving down the road and I see someone, walking on the sidewalk, and they don't have a rain jacket and they don't have an umbrella and they're just getting drenched with rain and they look miserable. It's hard to watch others go through the storm without the peace of God. And when I think about that, I think about a text in Colossians chapter 1, verse 20, where the Apostle Paul is writing of how Jesus was working to make peace by reconciling himself to all things, to all people through the cross. That person walking down that road in that metaphorical storm, that through the cross, Jesus was reconciling himself to all things, that we could be made right, that we could have the peace in the midst of our storm. And that word is only used, that making peace is only used that one time in Scripture. And then we find kind of a different form of that word that's used also only one time in Scripture in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 in the Beatitudes, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." See, friends, we are called both to embrace the peace that God gives us, to be reconciled to Him through Jesus so we can weather our storms well, but we're also called to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers. Peacekeepers are inactive. They step back. They pray for 70 and sunny. Peacemakers lean in the midst of the storm and the battle. They embrace it. They understand that they stand under the umbrella of Jesus, and they offer that same hope and reconciliation to others. As they're walking along that street, they get out of their car and they give them the umbrella of peace. So friends, how is your peace today? In the midst of the storm you may be going through right now, or the storm that is certainly coming at some point, do you have the covering of Jesus that gives you the peace? And how are you doing being a peacemaker? Offering others, pointing them to the reconciliation of Jesus so that they can weather their storm well. Grace and peace be with you all.